The information provided on this podcast is for general informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your qualified health provider with any questions you may have. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. Reliance on any information provided here is solely at your own risk.
Welcome. This is Birth, Baby. Your hosts are Sierra Morgan and Samantha Kelly. Sierra is a birth doula, hypnobirthing educator, and pediatric sleep consultant.
Samantha is a birth doula, childbirth educator, and lactation counselor. Join us as we guide you through your options for your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum journey. Thank you to our listeners for your continued support. If you enjoy our content, please be sure to like, follow, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. This helps us gain visibility to other people that could benefit from listening in. All right, everyone. We are back with Lauren Reyes and Janet Jones from Breastfeeding Success. They are the co-founders here in Austin, Texas. We had them on for another episode about the breast is best versus fed is best. So if you haven't heard that one, be sure to go tune in and you'll get a little bit of a background of what Breastfeeding Success is. But today we are having them on to talk a little bit about the history of lactation help throughout time and kind of how we got to where we are. And I think a lot of people think that why do we need lactation assistance? Our bodies have been doing this forever. Why would we need to hire someone to help? So thank you for being here to help kind of clear up and teach us a little bit about the history of all of this.
Thank you.
I think anyone who has ever had me come for a lactation visit or a postpartum visit and they are lactating and feeding their babies, they've heard me say, well, breastfeeding might be natural, but that doesn't mean it comes naturally to people. So I think I'm excited to hear a little bit about how we've kind of gotten where we are. I love history of all things birth and breastfeeding, so this is exciting. So to start us off, can you kind of walk us through the historical evolution of breastfeeding, lactation support, and from traditional practices to kind of modern medical approaches?
Yeah, so I'll start off and just go through some of the infrastructure and support that's been there. I mean, ideally, yes. We used to live in so much closer community with one another. There was not any other options available. So you breastfed or your baby might not have made it. So we had that support. You had knowledge from your mother, her grandmother, your sister, your aunts, or whatever. And they were all there helping. And so but as we started to grow apart as a community, there became a need for that historical knowledge, for that experience. And then especially as we started to see formula be introduced, now we have generations of people who have never breastfed. And so a lot of that generational knowledge is lost. So, but as far as the first groups that really started to provide support was really La Leche League, in a big way anyway. They really started to proliferate, especially in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, providing just peer support, essentially people kind of performing that role. The IBCLC credential was established in 1985. So it has not been that long. We're coming up on our 40-year anniversary next year, which I know Ilka, which I sit on the board of, will be planning a really big event in celebration of that 40 years. But I think, there's just so much that really goes into what goes into actually providing that support. Before I go into that, though, I really want Lauren to talk more about just more of the evolution of just lactation in general and our species.
Oh, great. Yes, I love this topic. So I like to think of birth and breastfeeding help in the human species as the oldest profession, even before what we consider the oldest profession. We were the oldest profession. And, as obviously we're mammals, and by definition, we feed our babies from milk that are produced from our mammary glands, which are our breasts. So dual function, it's great. We can go even like way into as we started to walk upright, and our babies were born, very prematurely, why our breast milk composition changed. And what we can say is that our breasts, because we're carry mammals, our breast milk composition is very much specified for brain and eye development. And it is for a baby that's going to stay relatively small for the first year of life so that we can carry them around. And another part of how we evolved as a species, and I would love to talk about this for a whole hour, but I know we only have a little bit, is in shared mothering. So the concept of mother, even in and of itself, is something that's a relatively new concept in terms of the importance that we place on it. As you know, we're tribal animals, and prior to this, very like post-industrial revolution concept of, nuclear family, and it's all about the mother, we shared mothering responsibilities, and that includes breastfeeding. So when we talk to new families and we're saying, hey, we're going to have to do some supplementation, let's get some pumping going, we may have to use some donor milk. We often talk about this from a narrative psychology perspective to validate that it is very common for our species to have to give extra milk to our babies. That's why I really was excited that you wanted to talk about this in tandem with our previous conversation, because more often than not, it's the lactation consultant with this historical context saying, we need some more milk on board. Our species did not evolve breastfeeding alone. We breastfed with all the other breastfeeders in our community coming and saying, hey, give me that little baby. That baby looks tiny, that you look, let me breastfeed that baby. I have an older baby, and my older baby's going to breastfeed on you. So that's in truth how we evolved and how we helped one another. And it is knowledge that was passed down with all the other wise woman knowledge that, as you know, was vilified when we became a patriarchal society. And I'm not going to go so deep into that, but I know that we all understand that midwifery is often vilified, and that is where a lot of that foundational breastfeeding knowledge is held, and that is to take power away from women. So as that happened, and we went through the Industrial Revolution, et cetera, people stopped breastfeeding, and then of course we lost that wise woman knowledge. How do I even latch a baby on? I don't know. I never saw anybody do it. So that's where the medical specialization of lactation consulting came in. And it started off as, peer-to-peer support. And then as we've become more of a medicalized society, which has its ups and its downs, we realize that we have to, as mammals, have a specialization or a medical specialty that's dedicated to our lactating. And so here we are, and it seems very late in the game that we're coming, but we are here, and we are part of the medical establishment and part of the specialization of that establishment.
I'm 38, and one of my dear friends, and I won't say which friend, when we were little girls, I remember she had her mom's friend, and they called her Mama so-and-so, and she would breastfeed her. And that was normal. And when her mom had to go to work, this mama watched her and nursed her along with her own kid while she was at work. No one was pumping. They weren't pumping and sending things in bags to them. She just used her milk while she was gone. And now people look at that and it's shameful. That's weird that someone else would breastfeed your baby, And that wasn't that long ago. That was in the 80s. So this isn't that long ago that some people were still doing this. And now it's just this weird, shameful thing and awkward, and it doesn't have to be. And what you're talking about is this ancestral thing that has been lost over time, which is really sad. And now we have all of this modern breastfeeding support, which is wonderful that we have it. How can we kind of combine those two and make a more holistic approach? Where is the filter here where we kind of weave these things together?
So I'd love to speak a little bit to that. There was actually just a recent evidence that came out and protocol that came out for infant feeding in disasters, and calling for wet nursing as a solution to that, and helping people to relactate whenever there is a disaster, because that's the most critical time. That is the time whenever infants and breastfeeding women are at the greatest risk for death because of infection. If you do not have the ability to have sterilized water and clean bottles themselves are some of the biggest vectors of contamination and bacterial infection in infants. And so wet nursing is one of the solutions, and there is a whole new protocol that is new that just came out worldwide. And I think that there also has to be education given to more providers. Right now, there is no education related to human lactation, just even about our own bodies in our health class. We learn about the uterus, we learn about pregnancy and how to give birth to, or not how to give birth to a baby, but what happens whenever the baby's born. But then it stops there. There's no discussion after that about, well, now, because of your hormone shift, now your breasts are going to come alive. They're going to change. They're going to start becoming a functional gland for your baby to produce milk. There is no education for nurses, like just in the general studies, but to become an RN. There's no education for a pediatrician or an obstetrician unless they sought it out on their own, or they're in an area of the country that does have like a specialized course where maybe they get a day on lactation. So for an IBCLC, there are multiple requirements, and this is where we would consider that lactation consultants, IBCLCs, are the specialist provider. So you have to have all of the prerequisite, like nursing prerequisites. So your biology, human anatomy and physiology, all of those courses. Then you have to have 95 lactation specific hours of education, and then anywhere from 300 to 1,000 clinical hours. And then you sit for a board exam. So this is the only specialist provider in lactation that has to go through that much rigor to be able to call themselves a specialist in lactation. And we need more of them. So I would say, like, again, wanting to talk about how we can do that, like how do we establish more support for families? We're trying to do our part. We have a lactation internship. It is a paid internship, and that's for most people, getting those clinical hours is the most difficult part to becoming an IBCLC. Hospitals typically just standalone will not let anybody come in and shadow. And then private practice LCs, you're typically only seeing like maybe 4 to 5 patients a day. So it's very difficult to get all of that in. And then you're training your competition. So a lot of people are not willing to do that. So that's where we have stepped in, and we've made it a mission of ours to remove barriers to entry into the field, to get more people from all different backgrounds that look like the mothers that they're serving to be able to provide this support.
Yeah, it's so important. I've had a few friends who have trained or are training with y'all, and I think hearing about kind of what you're doing, and I see with my clients whenever I hear, I'm at this hospital and I have a Breastfeeding Success person coming in, it makes me feel so much relief knowing that they are getting, good care, consistent care from y'all, versus like what you were sharing before. I don't remember if it was this episode or the last one. You were sharing about how in some lactation programs are prioritizing, some groups and not everybody's being seen. And we see that all the time. And it's such a bummer. But y'all really do give such great support. So bringing in some of that ancestral wisdom and practices, and kind of, even just working side by side with the nurses and the doctors so that they are able to at least know where to send people, because that's something we see a lot in private practice is not, we have pediatricians and whoever either giving poor breastfeeding advice or, not referring out when it's necessary. So knowing where to find it.
one of the most important messages to get out there is that it's normal to need support. It's normal to need help. So that's where that, kind of ancestral knowledge comes into play. And like, we just need more support systems that are institutionalized, like a part of the system, that are a part of the medical model. Go ahead, Lauren. Sorry.
I was actually going to say the same thing. I think one of the biggest barriers that is, facing American families and, your listeners is that we just simply don't have support once we're out of the hospital. Not only is it, very limited resources for, that type of support, whether it be, lactation or pelvic floor physical therapy or, postpartum doulas, it's not given to us by our health insurance companies, generally. And that's what we're fighting for, is that lactation services are mandated and that they need to be provided. And then along comes all of the other allied health providers, such as the pelvic floor physical therapists, the doulas, et cetera. And, one thing that I think about a lot is that even though we're all newcomers to the medical establishment, or, some of the newest comers, we have some of the most comprehensive training when it comes to family-centered and patient-centered care. And often the more established providers are looking to us to help them to get back in touch with that ancestral knowledge of simply listening and validating people. And that's a big part of what all of us do as allied health providers in these settings. So the more support, the better.
And this is why we love talking to people like you. This is why we love doing these podcasts and getting this information out there, because if we don't have this collaboration and we don't have these people helping, then we're in the days where you purchase your village, and we've got to be out there spreading the word and creating more of us and helping that whole system along. So thank you guys so much for being here today and sharing with us. You are welcome back anytime. We would love to dig deep into all of these subjects with you guys, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on Birth, Baby. Thanks again to Longing for Orpheus for our music. You can look him up on Spotify. Remember to leave a review, share, and follow wherever you get your podcasts. See you next week.